All right, let's start with a leadership analysis, expecting a deep dive into the psyche of Vladimir Putin. Stick with me. Because while, yes, the man's fashion sense seems perpetually stuck in 90s mobster chic, his leadership style, unfortunately, isn't a relic of a bygone era. It's a masterclass in toxicity, and frankly, it's a case study we can't afford to ignore. Today, we're diving into the toxic leadership traits of Vladimir Putin, especially highlighted during the war in Ukraine. This isn't about justifying or condoning his actions, it's about recognizing the warning signs, the insidious patterns of behavior that can poison any organization, from a small business to, well, a global superpower with questionable taste in hats. Over the next few minutes, we'll dissect Putin's leadership, not to give him more airtime than he's already tragically getting, but to arm ourselves with the knowledge to identify and combat these toxic traits wherever they may fester. Because the truth is, a Putin in the boardroom is just as dangerous as a Putin in the Kremlin. Now, Putin didn't become the poster child for toxic leadership overnight. It was a slow, methodical tightening of the screws, a gradual strangling of dissent that would make a boa constrictor blush. See, true power, the kind Putin craves, doesn't come from inspiring people, it comes from controlling them. And control he does. From silencing independent media to imprisoning political opponents, Putin has meticulously built a system where opposition isn't just unwelcome, it's practically non-existent. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's awful, but I'm not running a country here. What's this got to do with me? Well, here's the thing. That same impulse, that need to control every narrative, stifle every dissenting opinion, it's surprisingly transferable. Think about the micromanaging boss who hoards information, the CEO who surrounds themselves with yes men, terrified of anyone rocking the boat. That, my friends, is Putinism in miniature. And it's just as destructive on a smaller scale, because when you create a culture where people are afraid to speak truth to power, you inevitably end up with, well, terrible decisions. Case in point, the war in Ukraine. A war that, by most expert accounts, was a strategic blunder of epic proportions, fueled in no small part by Putin's own echo chamber of sycophants. The takeaway here is chillingly simple. Whether you're leading a team of 5 or a nation of millions, a culture of fear and control is a one-way ticket to disaster. Now, let's talk about accountability, or rather the distinct lack thereof, because in Putin's Russia, accountability is about as common as a vegetarian at a borscht festival. It just doesn't exist. See, when you're the self-proclaimed savior of a nation, when you've carefully constructed an image of infallible leadership, admitting fault becomes, well, inconvenient. So what's a modern czar to do? Easy deflect and blame. The West is always a convenient scapegoat, a shadowy cabal plotting Russia's downfall. Domestic problems, clearly the work of foreign agents and saboteurs. Economic woes, blame it on those meddling sanctions. It's a greatest hits compilation of excuses, all designed to do one thing: shield Putin from any personal responsibility. And the truly terrifying thing is this aversion to accountability. It's not just a Putin problem, it's a virus that can infect any organization, from government agencies to Fortune 500 companies. Think about the manager who blames their team for their own shortcomings, the executive who refuses to acknowledge their role in a costly mistake. That's the Putin playbook in action. And the consequences are always the same. A culture of impunity where mistakes are repeated and mediocrity reigns supreme. Because let's be clear, true leadership isn't about shirking responsibility, it's about embracing it. It's about creating a culture where mistakes are seen as opportunities for growth, not career-ending blunders. And that, my friends, is a lesson Putin seems to have missed entirely. You know, in a world drowning in misinformation, it's almost comforting to know that some things never change. Like, for instance, the fact that bears still shit in the woods, the Pope is still Catholic, and Vladimir Putin really loves propaganda. I mean, we're talking about a level of state-sponsored spin that would make even a seasoned PR executive blush. From carefully curated news broadcasts to armies of online trolls, Putin's regime has turned misinformation into an art form, a weapon of mass deception wielded with chilling effectiveness. Now, you might be thinking, okay, John, that's all well and good, but I'm not exactly churning out state-sponsored propaganda here. I'm just trying to run a business. And to that, I say fair point. But Here's the thing, the line between persuasive marketing and outright manipulation, it's thinner than you might think. Think about the companies that make promises they can't keep, the brands that prioritize profits over transparency, the leaders who spin narratives instead of facing facts. That, my friends, is Putinism in a suit and tie. It's the slow erosion of trust, the insidious spread of doubt that can poison even the healthiest of organizations. Because here's the truth, in the long run, authenticity always wins. Building a culture of honesty, of transparency, where facts matter and truth is valued. That's not just good ethics, it's good business. And it's the antidote to the toxic misinformation that Putin so expertly peddles. Chapter 4. Putin, the man, the myth, the brand. Now, let's talk about branding, because if there's one thing Putin understands, it's the power of a carefully crafted image. I mean, the man's a walking, talking, shirtless horseback riding brand, all steely-eyed stares and carefully staged displays of masculinity. He's like the Dos Equis guy if the Dos Equis guy invaded sovereign nations and had a penchant for disappearing journalists. But here's the thing, beneath the carefully curated facade, the cult of personality, lies a dangerous truth. When you build your leadership on image over substance, on unwavering loyalty over critical thinking, you create a system that's as brittle as it is unsustainable. Because true innovation, the kind that thrives on dissent and challenges the status quo, well, that's simply not compatible with a cult of personality. Think about it, in Putin's Russia, would anyone dare to question the great leader's strategic brilliance, even as his tanks are getting bogged down in Ukrainian mud? Would anyone risk their career or potentially their freedom to point out the flaws in the emperor's new clothes? Of course not. And that, my friends, is the danger of the cult of personality. It stifles dissent, it rewards blind loyalty, and it ultimately leads to stagnation and decline. So the next time you're tempted to build your leadership brand on charisma and image, remember Putin. Remember that true leadership isn't about being worshipped. It's about empowering others to be their best selves, even if that means occasionally disagreeing with the boss. Chapter 5, Teamwork, not on this team. Now let's talk about teamwork, or rather the distinct lack thereof. Because in Putin's Russia, teamwork is about as common as a sober oligarch at a yacht party. It's just not how they roll. Surrounded by yes-men and rivals, collaboration becomes backstabbing your way to the top. It's a cutthroat environment where loyalty is fleeting and paranoia is a competitive advantage. And the consequences are about as predictable as they are disastrous. Remember that whole special military operation in Ukraine? The one that was supposed to be over in a matter of days? Well, part of the reason it's been anything but a resounding success is the staggering lack of coordination and communication within the Russian military. Units operating in silos, conflicting orders, intelligence failures. It's a masterclass in how not to run a military campaign. And this dysfunction, this toxic culture of competition over collaboration, it's not just confined to the battlefield, it seeps into every level of Putin's regime. From government ministries to state-owned corporations, the name of the game is self-preservation, not working together for the greater good. It's a recipe for disaster, and one that any leader, regardless of their industry or organization, would do well to avoid. Because here's the thing, true success, the kind that lasts, is always a team effort. It's about fostering a culture of trust and collaboration, where everyone feels empowered to contribute their best work, without fear of being undermined or thrown under the proverbial bus. And that, my friends, is a lesson Putin seems to have missed entirely. Chapter 6. The ripple effect of toxicity. Now, we've spent the last few minutes dissecting the finer points of Putin's toxic leadership. But let's be clear, this isn't just an academic exercise. This is real life. The consequences of Putin's actions are felt far beyond the Kremlin. We're talking about a war that has claimed thousands of lives, displaced millions, and destabilized the global order. An economy in freefall, crippled by sanctions and corruption. A nation increasingly isolated, its people fed propaganda and fear, all for the ambitions of one man. The ripple effect of toxicity doesn't stop at borders. It can poison any organization, any community. The bullying boss, the greedy CEO, the divisive politician, they all contribute to a toxic world But we can stop it by understanding the warning signs, calling out toxic behavior, and demanding better from our leaders. We can create a future where empathy and collaboration trump ego and competition. Because we deserve better. The world deserves better. And it's up to all of us to demand it. Outro, the un-Putin way. So there you have it. A crash course in the dangers of toxic leadership, courtesy of the Kremlin's resident autocrat. Now, I know what you're thinking. This was supposed to be about leadership, not a depressing descent into the geopolitical abyss. But here's the thing, sometimes the best way to learn what to do is to study what not to do. And Putin, he is a masterclass in leadership failure, despite his supposed success. But by understanding these toxic leadership traits, we can learn valuable lessons for fostering healthier and more ethical organizational cultures. We can choose empathy over ego, collaboration over competition, and accountability over blame. We can create workplaces where people feel valued, respected, and empowered to do their best work. So, the next time you're faced with a leadership challenge, remember the cautionary tale of Vladimir Putin, and then do the exact opposite. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more insights.